Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Monday, May 22nd, 2023. If you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. You point and click anywhere on this map. It'll bring you the forecast for that location along with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories. Well, the big weather news continues to be the river breakup that is ongoing across the state of Alaska, with ice jam and snowmelt flooding still threatening some areas. We are especially monitoring the Kobuk River basin, as well as the upper, middle, and lower Yukon rivers, kind of at different phases here in the river breakup season, with snowmelt flooding being an issue now, the upper half of the river, and still the potential for ice jam flooding through the lower half of the river. Gale force low pressure will bring rain and wind to Kodiak Island in the Alaska Peninsula now through Tuesday, and below normal temperatures look to be the rule now in the extended temperature outlook through the end of the month into early June, especially centered on the southern mainland. Quick check of some FAA webcams this Monday afternoon. Utqiagvik, low clouds and fog. A cold front is approaching you from the northwest. Will be passing through later tonight and early on Tuesday. Ambler enjoying sunny skies. Some of the warmest temperatures are on the south slopes of the Brooks Range down to just north of the Yukon River. Some areas topping out around 70 today. Further south and west, Russian Mission is under a flood warning right now in the Yukon River. You can see those flood waters, temperature 52 degrees with partly sunny skies. And then Kodiak seeing rain, fog, breezy conditions, 45 degrees, and winds will be picking up there along with the rain as we go into tonight. Here are the current advisories and warnings. We have flood watches still upper Yukon, Kobuk Basin, and down through the lower Yukon. This map here gives a little more detail. So the flood watch here in the upper Yukon, including the Porcupine River through the Yukon Flats. We have a flood warning at Stevens Village as a result of just all of this heavy snowmelt runoff feeding along the upper Yukon River. Further downstream below Tanana, we have flood advisories, Galena, Koyukuk, and Nulato. And this area here still has the potential there could be some ice jams try to develop with that higher water. And then further to the north, we have a flood warning that continues at Kobuk, but below downstream through Ambler, there is a flood watch just for the potential there for flooding yet to occur. The water at Shugnak has come up 15-20 feet on Sunday, so pretty high water coming currently through the Kobuk system. And then the lower Yukon, Russian Village has the flood warning in effect now, but there's a lot of ice still along the lower Yukon and also ice along the Delta and shorefast ice. So concerned is as this higher water works its way down through the system and breaks up this ice, there's going to be an increased threat of ice jam flooding in addition to the already high water that will be flowing through the system. In through the Copper River Basin, at least the good news is the advisories, the impactful advisories, have been allowed to expire. Still very high water levels on the upper Copper River and Gulkana rivers, but at least there at Glen Allen and Gulkana, the flood threat has greatly diminished there to any property. So areas of the Yukon Flats still having high fire danger, and again, no advisories, watches, warnings in that regard, but still something to keep in mind as we get further along in the system. Though things are going to be changing there in the far north, cooling down and getting wetter, so that'll help reduce the fire danger threat. Here is a good surge of moisture that's coming into the western Gulf, and it will impact Kodiak Island in the northern portions of the Alaska Peninsula, bringing wind and rain. Here's the low pressure there that's going to just slowly work its way northeastward, with this front continuing northeastward up into the Gulf. Meanwhile, we have a trough of low pressure back up through the central interior, and here's that cold front. This cold front will be pushing in through the north slopes and then just kind of paralleling the spine of the Brooks Range into northwest Canada as we go toward midweek. So later tonight, low continues to lift slowly northward up along the Alaska Peninsula, bringing more wind and rain there. Some of the strongest winds will be at the entrance of Cook Cook Inlet around Shelikof Strait, gale force winds to at least about 40 knots. And here's the cold front on Tuesday afternoon. It'll be located pushing up along the spine of the Brooks Range, and by Wednesday it kind of stalls out, but on the north side of this front and along the higher peaks and elevations, the higher passes there of the Brooks Range, there could be some late season accumulating snow later Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Meanwhile, the low here around Kodiak Islands tends to just kind of sit there with the front butting up along the Gulf Coast. So that's where some of the active weather will be. We're looking at temperatures to stay above freezing in the lower mid-40s in the Panhandle, dipping off into the mid-30s there in the Copper River Basin, about 44 in the Anchorage Bowl. And for Tuesday afternoon, temperatures 50s to near 60 degrees in the Panhandle. Nothing like last week when you had temperatures in the 70s and 80s. And then highs be near 60 at Glen Allen and back toward McGrath. A little cooler down here, 40s, upper 40s, say, along Kodiak Island as a result of the thicker cloud cover, wind and rain. Temperatures Wednesday morning across south central and much of the Panhandle, generally low to mid 40s for lows, and temperatures with any bit of sun could get back up into the 60s here across the southern part of the Panhandle, as well as, say, the Copper River Basin. In the far north, warmest temperatures remain along the Yukon River overnight, where that will continue to facilitate the snow melt. It is still occurring, and temperatures could still hit or exceed 70 Fairbanks on up through the Yukon Flats. Temperatures along the Arctic coast will just be a couple degrees above freezing. The cold front is going to push a little further south and east. We expect temperatures by Wednesday morning to be at or below freezing across all of the North Slope, with the potential for a band of some accumulating wet snow, late season snow here along that area as we go through Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Temperatures along the Yukon River stay in the 40s to near 50. And then Wednesday afternoon, we still expect maybe temperatures near 70 in the Yukon Flats, upper 60s, say, at both Fairbanks and Eagle. But colder air, this front's just going to stall out right along this region and behind it. And the colder air temperatures will generally have to struggle to get much above the freezing mark. In through the southwest, lows tonight will be generally at or above 40. And then the coolest temperatures lingering here in the lower Yukon Delta, 47 for a high there along the south shore at Imanak there of the Norton Sound. And as we go out along the Aleutians, we expect temperatures Wednesday afternoon to get back up into the 50s as we go up the Yukon and Kuskokwim basins, but generally in the 40s along the coast. And looking at this temperature outlook, really, this has not changed. This is not the trend. If you're looking forward to some warmer summer-like weather, below normal temperatures centered on the southern mainland, especially surrounding areas of Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, including the Anchorage area, and otherwise generally below normal temperatures the entire southern half of the state. A little above normal, maybe up toward Utqiagvik, but still a likelihood of above normal precipitation across the eastern, southeastern interior to the Alcan border. So definitely cooler and a bit wetter weather expected across a good portion of the mainland here through the end of the month.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's now time for your aviation weather. If you have flight planned Tuesday or on Wednesday, the main things we're going to be watching is an area of low pressure here, vicinity of Kodiak Island, the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula, with a frontal band extending eastward from that. Brisk east-southeasterly flow ahead of that front will cause areas of turbulence, especially there at the entrance of Cook Inlet. IFR conditions, lower Gulf back through Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait. Also IFR conditions along areas of the Beaufort Sea and the Chukchi Sea associated with a cold front that will be pressing east-southeastward, and then a broad area of the Bering Sea just under MVFR conditions. For Tuesday afternoon, we'll have widespread VFR conditions across the mainland back into northwest Canada, but IFR along and behind that front here along the Arctic coast centered on Utqiagvik Barrow. And further south, we have IFR conditions the lower southwestern areas of the Gulf and south and east of Kodiak Island, as well as central Bering back out toward the far western Aleutians. And for Wednesday morning, IFR conditions will continue along and just behind that cold front there along the central eastern Arctic coast, areas of the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait into St. Lawrence, and then an area of IFR conditions out there over the western half of the Aleutians and here across the western Gulf up through Prince William Sound, the east side of the Kenai. And Wednesday, IFR conditions expand across the Gulf Coast, in through down along coastal areas of the Panhandle, as well as the western arm of the Alaska Range going down into the Alaska Peninsula. Widespread IFR from the Bering Strait down through St. Lawrence, along the coastline there of the Yukon, Kuskokwim deltas, Nunavik Island west towards St. Matthew, and then a broad area of IFR conditions in the central and western Aleutians. Pass conditions on Tuesday, Anatuvik Pass as well as Adigan Pass there in the eastern half of the Brooks Range should generally see VFR conditions hold. Further south and west as we get down in the Alaska Range, VFR becoming MVFR at Lake Clark and Merrill. Also VFR becoming MVFR at Rainy Pass on Tuesday. As we round through the central and eastern Alaska Range, we expect VFR conditions at Windy Pass, Isabel, and Mentasta Passes. Going down across the Copper River Valley, we expect VFR conditions, Tanita Pass, VFR. And as we near the Gulf Coast, Portage Pass, VFR becoming MVFR, with more in the way of MVFR conditions there, especially the east entrance toward Prince William Sound. And then finally, across much of the Panhandle on Tuesday, VFR conditions, and up there in the far north end, Chilkoot and White, VFR anticipated. So freezing levels aloft. We've lost the really strong ridge that was in place. There's still a hint of it with freezing levels aloft, upwards of 6,000 feet here across northern areas of the state along and north of the Yukon River, and above 8,000 feet there and through central Canada. But there's a bit of a squeeze here, and we have the low pressure that's sitting here just to the southwest of Kodiak Island. We see the freezing levels aloft bump up 4, 6, 8, 10,000 feet down into the North Pacific. Cooler air up into eastern Russia and back off toward the north and west. As a result, the greatest threat for some icing could occur areas in the mountains here from Lake Iliamna down a little further south along the mainland coastline of the Alaska Peninsula. And that would be generally above 6,000 and 9,000 feet because we do have a little warmer air aloft there south of Kodiak Island. Here out toward northwest Canada, above 10,000 feet and some areas of rain and snow and showers. Further west, there will be some scattered showers, and we expect the freezing icing level to be above 5,000 feet there in the far northern Bering Strait. Upper level jet stream winds strongest in the North Pacific south of the Gulf, and then along the central Aleutians upwards of 100 knots or so. At 700 millibars, 9,000 feet, we find a couple of low circulations. The main one here over just to the southwest there, Kodiak Island, weak ridging extending up along the Elkham border, and then bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We have a double barrel low circulation. Again, the primary low is the one sitting here just on the southwest side of Kodiak Island, and we have stronger winds coming in through the entrance there of Cook Inlet and across that part of the Alaska Range in excess of 50 knots, at least at 3,000 feet aloft. So that translates to an area of considerable moderate turbulence over areas of the southwest down through the lower portion of the Alaska Range, including Lake Iliamna, Shelikof Strait, and the entrance there to Cook Inlet, surface to 6,000 feet, and then another area of moderate turbulence way out in the western Aleutians at surface to 4,000 feet.
Cadets, and welcome Welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship, and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this. Yow!
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discoverer, and today we're going to take Deep Discoverer up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
And how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Wow! Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the seafloor. And over here we have scientists. Hi, Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like Octonauts do.
Status report, Dashi.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and Octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the Octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Debbie.
steward on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ.
Ahoy, Captain.
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm an Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's just jump into the sea ice here. The discussion as far as the far north goes, we have plenty of ice remaining in place along the Beaufort Sea coast, though we are getting areas opening up now along the northwest coast, west of Wainwright, down along Cape Lisburn and Point Hope. Areas also opening up here through the Bering Strait, especially along the Russian coast, and also we're seeing some larger areas trying to open up here in Norton Sound. Further south, the pack ice continues to shrink here out through the northern portion of the Bering Sea and areas surrounding St. Matthew. Still some shore-fast ice along the Yukon Delta, which is not good news because there still is some ice on the river, and there is some concern that this could jam things up, especially as the higher water levels work their way down from the middle Yukon, because there's a bigger push of water further upstream. So we'll keep a very close eye on that as we go through this week, and the threat of any ice jam flooding there on the lower Yukon River. Across areas of the Panhandle in the inner channels, winds will be southerly 10 knots, Lynn Canal waves a foot or 2, north-northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, Stevens Passage down through Ketchikan, waves 2 to 3 feet. Along the outer coast, generally west to northwest winds, south of Gustavus, offshore there, waves running 5 to 7 feet. Easterly winds, though, 10 to 20 knots outside of Yakutat Bay with waves of 7 to near 9 feet. Along areas of the inner channels for Wednesday, variable winds generally 5 to 10 knots, waves running a foot or 2. The outer coast winds will be generally southwest at 10 to 15 knots, but turning more southeast to east outside of Yakutat Bay, waves generally 5 to 7 feet. Areas of the northwestern Gulf, some stronger winds. There is a front associated with low pressure near Kodiak Island that will be slowly curling back up into the northern portion of the Gulf. Out ahead of it, east winds 30 to as high as 40 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves running around 10 feet. East winds Prince William Sound 15 knots, waves 3 feet. Northeast winds in the upper third of Cook Inlet at 20 knots and waves about 4 feet. On Wednesday, generally east to southeast winds 25 knots here out over the northwestern Gulf with waves of 7 to 8 feet. East winds 15 knots, Prince William Sound 3-foot waves, and then northeast to north winds around 20 knots the length of Cook Inlet with waves running 4 to as high as -5 feet there, just west of Homer. Now, the circulation of the low here situated near Kodiak Island. Winds could be 30 knots there within Shelikof Strait on Tuesday with waves as high as 10, 11 feet. But winds turn back around toward the west-northwest around 20 knots as we go down the middle and lower portion of the peninsula. Waves 5 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side and 2 to 3 feet on the Bering side. And then by the time we get to Wednesday, winds generally across much of the region go west-southwest 15 to 20 knots. Waves generally running 4 to 5 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. The Aleutians will see winds, at least the central eastern Aleutians, out of the west 15 to 20 knots, turning southerly 20 to 25 knots west of Adak. Waves generally 3 to 5 feet on the Bering side and 4 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side. And as we go into Wednesday, there will be another area of low pressure approaching. We expect westerly winds, far eastern Aleutians 20 knots, but becoming southeast 20 to 25 knots through the central Aleutians, and waves generally running 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side and 4 to 6 feet on the North Pacific. For areas of the southwest on Tuesday, winds will generally be offshore out of the northeast 10 to 15 knots, northerly 15 knots at St. Matthew, turning northwesterly 15 knots at St. Paul. And as we go into Wednesday, a continuation, winds a little more northerly out of Norton Sound and off of the Yukon Delta at 10 knots, as high as 20 knots towards St. Matthew with waves there a few feet, turning westerly 15 knots out of St. Paul, St. George, as well as into Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays with waves generally running a few feet. Along the Arctic coast, look for west winds 5 to 10 knots, more southerly winds through the lower Chukchi and Bering Strait at 10 to 15 knots. And on Wednesday, we expect broad area of northeasterly winds 15 knots along the immediate Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knots, especially there off of Point Hope, and then 20-knot north winds passing through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence. And a quick check of the weather map. There's that low pressure near Kodiak Island Tuesday afternoon. Cold front working its way in along the north slope with some wet snow on the back side of that, and the low still sitting near Kodiak Island on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.